Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah, great to be here.
Today, we're tackling a question that's kind of been plaguing humanity forever. How can you tell a true visionary from a con artist?
Especially when charisma and controversy, well, they kind of go hand in hand, right?
It's like they're two sides of the same coin sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why we're digging into the complicated legacy of Harvey Milk,
San Francisco city supervisor, prominent gay rights activist.
assassinated in 1978.
You know what's fascinating about Milk is he really embodies this whole grifter or gifted dilemma. I mean, was he truly fighting for equality, or was he just really good at leveraging a changing political landscape for his own personal gain?
And let's not forget, this isn't just ancient history. There's current controversy swirling around him. There's the school district in California that's actually trying to ban a textbook that even just mentions milk. All because of this relationship he had.
Yeah, when he was in his 30s with a 16-year-old.
It's a situation that forces us to grapple with a lot of uncomfortable questions about power and consent and the whole thing. But we'll delve into all those details later.
We'll definitely examine the relationship within the legal and social context of the time.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Milk's early life. I mean, it doesn't exactly scream future activist.
Right.
Born to Jewish parents in New York, played football.
Served in the Navy.
Yeah, during the Korean War even.
Reached the rank of lieutenant.
I mean, it almost sounds like a recipe for a very different kind of political path.
You're right, it does. And it just goes to show how much Milk evolved over time. I mean, he even started out as a Goldwater Republican.
Wow.
But his move to San Francisco in the 70s, right when the gay rights movement was gaining so much momentum, that seems to have been the turning point.
And it's the Castro district that becomes like the central point of his story.
Yes. Absolutely.
He opens a camera shop there, and he quickly becomes this like beloved figure in the community. He was even nicknamed the mayor of Castro Street, long before he ever actually held office.
Yeah, and it's crucial to note that this was a time of intense social change. San Francisco was right at the forefront of it all. And the Castro was becoming a haven for the LGBTQ plus community.
And Milk was right there in the middle of it.
Absolutely, front and center.
But he didn't achieve political success right away.
No, he did.
He ran for office a couple of times and lost before finally winning a seat on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977.
Right.
So what changed?
Well, that year, the city switched to district elections, which allowed for more localized representation. And this proved really crucial for Milk because it gave him a much better chance of winning in a district with a large LGBTQ plus population.
So is this a case of like a savvy politician just recognizing an opportunity, or was it more about him tailoring his message to fit a specific electorate?
It's hard to say for sure.
I mean, it could be a little bit of both, right?
It very well could be.
Okay, so once he's in office, he champions this city ordinance banning discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Huge victory at the time. Really groundbreaking. We take these kinds of protections for granted now, but back then this was a radical idea in most of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. He also led the charge against the Briggs Initiative, which would ban gay teachers from working in California schools.
Oh yeah, the Briggs Initiative. That was a huge national story. It really put Milk in the national spotlight.
It did, and it kind of showed the political climate of the time, right?
It was a very divisive issue, and Milk was right in the middle of it.
Debating John Briggs.
Yeah, the initiative's sponsor, and really rallying opposition.
He even managed to get support from some surprising allies.
Like Ronald Reagan?
Right, the then governor.
Who actually opposed the measure.
So, I mean, was he genuinely trying to build these bridges across the political spectrum, or was it just a calculated move to raise his own profile?
Yeah. It's tough to say. It seems like everything Milk did had this kind of double-edged quality to it.
For sure. Okay, so we've got someone who's ambitious, charismatic, definitely knows how to work the system. But was it all in service of genuine social change?
Right.
Or was there a more self-serving motive going on?
To get closer to that answer, we need to look at how Milk interacted with the gay community itself.
Okay.
And it's not always a simple story.
Go.
He frequently clashed with more established gay political groups in San Francisco.
Oh, really?
He pushed for a bolder, more confrontational approach to activism.
So was he a true visionary, challenging the status quo and really pushing for radical change? Or was he just an outsider, trying to shake things up to grab power for himself?
It's a question that keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It really does.
And it leads us directly to the controversy that's making headlines today.
Yeah.
That relationship that has some people calling for Milk to be erased from history books altogether.
The relationship with 16-year-old Jack McKinley that began when Milk was in his early 30s.
Exactly.
We can't just gloss over that.
No, we can't.
Well, it's important to remember that the age of consent in New York at the time was 14.
Meaning the relationship wasn't technically illegal?
Right.
Right.
But the power dynamics involved in a relationship between an adult in their 30s and a teenager,
Well, they certainly raise ethical questions.
regardless of the law.
Absolutely.
So this is where things get really complicated, right?
Yeah.
How do we reconcile this part of his personal life with his undeniable achievements as a political leader and an activist?
It's a tough question.
It's a challenge, and it's a conversation we need to have. But before we jump into that, I think we need to look more closely at the specifics of Milk's political legacy beyond the kind of symbolic importance that's often attributed to him.
Okay. Sounds good.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty of his accomplishments. What concrete changes did he actually bring about during his time in office?
One of his most notable achievements was spearheading that bill to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment, housing, and public accommodations in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge win for gay rights, not just in the city, but across the U.S.
It's crazy to think about how far we've come since then, but at the time this was a radical piece of legislation.
Yeah.
How did he even get it passed?
It's a testament to his political skills, really.
Yeah.
He was able to build this coalition of support that included labor unions, minority groups, even some conservative politicians. He understood that to achieve lasting change, he needed to find common ground with people who didn't necessarily agree with him on everything.
So was he compromising his ideals to get things done, or was it just strategic, to achieve a greater good? It's like we keep coming back to this question of what was really motivating him.
Right, and it's something we'll have to keep in mind as we go forward. Another example of Milk's unconventional approach was the poop-in he organized.
What?
The poop-in to protest the city's lack of public restrooms.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some might see it as a publicity stunt, but it definitely got people talking about an issue that was affecting a lot of people.
It's interesting how he used humor and well poop to draw attention to serious issues.
Yeah.
Do you think that was part of his strategy? Like to make complex problems more relatable?
I think there's an element of that for sure. He understood the power of storytelling, using vivid imagery to connect with people on an emotional level. He knew that sometimes you have to make a little noise to get people to listen.
He wasn't afraid to be confrontational either, even when it came to members of his own community.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like he really believed that the gay rights movement needed to be more assertive, more demanding.
Right. He wasn't interested in assimilation or being accepted on someone else's terms. He wanted full equality, and he was willing to fight for it, even if it meant alienating people along the way.
Which tragically brings us to the event that ultimately defined his legacy, his assassination.
Less than a year after taking office.
Milk and San Francisco Mayor George Moscone,
Shot and killed by Dan White.
a former city supervisor.
It was a devastating moment, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for the entire city and the nation as a whole. White, who had resigned from the Board of Supervisors but wanted his job back, he snuck into City Hall and murdered both Milk and Moscone. And then the trial that followed was one of the most controversial in American history.
Yeah, that's where the infamous Twinkie Defense comes in, right?
Exactly.
White's lawyers argued that his addiction to junk food Twinkies in particular had contributed to a diminished mental state that led to the murders.
I mean, it's a bit more nuanced than that. The defense didn't actually say that Twinkies caused the murders. Their argument focused on White's changed diet and behavior as evidence of depression, which they claimed led to diminished capacity.
But still blaming junk food for a double homicide. How did the jury even buy that?
It's really hard to say for sure what swayed the jury, but they ultimately convicted White of voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder.
Wow.
And he only ended up serving 5 years in prison.
5 years for taking 2 lives. That's outrageous. No wonder there was so much anger and protest, especially from the gay community.
Absolutely. For many people, the verdict felt like this blatant miscarriage of justice, a sign that homophobia was still so deeply ingrained within the legal system. Some people even believed that the defense had successfully used these stereotypes about gay men to paint Milk as this aggressive and manipulative figure, and somehow influence the jury's decision.
It's a reminder of how fragile progress can be and how much work still needs to be done to really achieve true equality.
Yeah.
Milk's assassination, though, became this major turning point in the fight for LGBTQ plus rights.
It galvanized a new wave of activism.
It's almost as if his death transformed him into a martyr,
Right.
amplifying his message and giving the movement a new sense of urgency.
Absolutely. It's tragic, but also undeniably powerful.
And it's impossible to ignore that Milk seemed to anticipate his own death.
Yeah.
He made those audio recordings before his assassination, basically predicting that he would be killed and laying out these instructions for how he wanted his legacy to be handled.
It's true. Those recordings are chilling to listen to. He even named specific people he wanted to succeed him, and he urged closeted LGBTQ plus people to come out and live their truth. He was already thinking about how his death could be used to further the cause he believed in.
So was he just being pragmatic?
Yeah.
Recognizing the dangers of his position?
Mm-hmm.
Or was there a part of him that was kind of like self-mythologizing, this desire to control the narrative even if he was gone?
It's a good question. It speaks to that whole thing about whether he was a savvy strategist or master manipulator, In a way, his foresight paid off. His assassination, as horrific as it was, it forced society to confront the violence and discrimination faced by the LGBTQ plus community.
And his legacy continues to grow, even decades after his death. Right. Schools, streets, even a U.S. Navy ship have been named in his honor. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously by President Obama in 2009.
It's incredible. It's a testament to the enduring power of his story.
Yeah, he's become an icon, the symbol of hope and progress.
Wow. But even with all the honors and the accolades, the debate continues. Was Harvey Milk a true visionary who changed the world?
Or was he a con artist who just really skillfully played the game to his advantage?
It's a tough question.
I think that's what makes this episode so challenging and so important. There are no easy answers here. Milk was a complex, contradictory figure.
Yeah.
He defied easy categorization.
Yeah, he was a product of his time, but he also helped to shape that time.
He wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, even if it meant ruffling a few feathers.
Especially within his own community.
Think about it. Milk often clashed with those more established, more conservative gay rights groups in San Francisco.
Right.
He thought they were too focused on assimilation.
On being accepted by the mainstream.
And he was pushing for this more radical approach.
Yeah, one that really celebrated difference and demanded full equality.
He wanted to change the system, not just fit into it. And that kind of boldness, well, it attracts attention, both positive and negative.
It certainly does.
Which is why he remains such a polarizing figure even today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even within the LGBTQ plus community, some people see him as a sellout.
Oh, yeah, someone who compromised too much.
Right.
But others see him as a revolutionary who really opened doors for the progress we see today.
Yeah, it's all about perspective.
It's important to remember, though, no social movement is ever like a monolith.
That's true.
There are always going to be different factions, different approaches, different visions for the future.
Milk represented a particular strand of that movement, one that was both pragmatic and uncompromising.
Yeah.
He wanted to work within the system to change it, but he also wasn't afraid to push boundaries and, challenge assumptions.
And we can't forget the context he was operating in.
Right.
This was a time when homosexuality was still widely stigmatized and criminalized.
Absolutely.
The fact that he was even able to achieve what he did to win elected office as an openly gay man, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's a huge accomplishment.
His election was a watershed moment, a sign that change was possible even if it was slow and it met with a lot of resistance.
And tragically, that resistance led to his assassination. It's hard to believe it's been over 4 decades since Milk and Moscone were murdered.
It's a profound loss, a reminder of the hate and prejudice that still exists.
But their deaths also served as a catalyst for change.
It galvanized the LGBTQ plus rights movement and inspired so many people
to fight for equality.
And I think that's a key part of Milk's legacy, his ability to inspire. He wasn't just a politician. He was a symbol.
Yeah, a beacon of hope.
For a marginalized community.
His story really shows that even in the face of adversity, even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference.
So after all this digging, after all this unpacking, where do we land on Harvey Milk grifter or gifted?
Visionary or con artist?
I don't know. I think we have to resist the urge to oversimplify him. Just label him neatly as one or the other. The truth often is way more complicated.
He was a man of his time, shaped by the social and political currents of his era.
But he also helped shape those currents.
Right.
He left a lasting impact.
He was flawed, capable of both great acts of courage and questionable choices.
But his commitment to fighting for equality, for justice, for the rights of all people, regardless of their sexual orientation, it's undeniable.
It really is.
And that's the legacy I think we should remember. Milk's story is a reminder that progress is rarely a straight line. It often comes at a cost.
But it's also a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of fighting for what you believe in, and the impact that one person can have on the world.
So as you're reflecting on what you've learned about Harvey Milk, ask yourself, Does knowing more about his personal life, the controversies, does it change how you see his accomplishments?
Or does it just add more layers to an already complex and fascinating figure?
Those answers, those are for you to decide. That's what we're all about here on Grifter or Gifted.
Exactly.
We don't give you the easy answers. We equip you with the knowledge to draw your own conclusions.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into a fascinating and controversial figure.
See you then.